Did you know that 1 in 6 of us feels lonely? But why? Aren't we even more connected than we were before? Is social media actually social? Or is it having the opposite effect? And why are we feeling more and more alone despite having the world at our fingertips? I'm Stefanie Dekker, and this is The Stream.
This is your sign if you don't have any friends to start hanging out by yourself, and how to make it less daunting when you go out by yourself.
You feel lonely even when around others. It's not just about being alone, it's about feeling unseen. Even in a crowd, no matter who you're with, the loneliness doesn't go away.
I should get some sleep.
Now, the hashtag lonely has had over 13.7 billion views on TikTok, and that number is from 2023. Is that a cry for help? Well, on today's show, we're going to analyze our apparent collective detachment from humanity, and we're going to discuss how things like mental health, screen time, cost of living, modern dating trends, the 24-hour news cycle, and isolation could be why so many people feel lost. Well, to unpack all of this, I am joined by Larissa May, the founder of Half the Story, a nonprofit dedicated to improving the next generation's relationship with technology. She joins us from Sonoma in California. And we have Tracey Mark, a psychiatrist and the author of Why Am I So Anxious? And she's also a content creator, and she joins us from Atlanta in Georgia. Tracey, let me kick this off with you by defining loneliness. It doesn't mean just physically alone, does it? How would you describe it?
No, absolutely not. It doesn't mean physically alone. In fact, I think people can feel more lonely when they're in the presence of others if they don't feel connected. So loneliness essentially is just this feeling of it's either being alone, actually physically, or a sense of not being understood or not being heard or seen. And I think that when people are in a crowd of people, especially if other people around them know each other or are connecting with each other, it can amplify your sense of disconnection from those people.
Now, Larissa, you work in a field which I love the term, how it was described, the digital wellness sphere. And your mission, I was reading your website, the statement is to empower the next generation's relationship with technology. Now, what kind of effect would you say that technology has had, particularly on the generation like Gen Z and Gen Alpha that are growing up in a world that is fully digital?
Well, the first thing is that for the next generation, they have not been able to understand the difference between connecting and real human connection. And as a result, they're scrolling more than they're socializing, studying, or sleeping. And what we're seeing, what we just addressed, is that they're lonelier than ever. They're spending more time alone. But even more so with the revolution of AI, now we're seeing a dependency on these different chatbots, which ultimately not only has emotional implications, but it also has cognitive implications in terms of executive functioning and problem solving. So what we're ultimately really seeing is an apathetic generation that isn't really using their minds to help move their lives forward because they've been so stunted by the tools of technology around them. However, on the flip side, we are seeing through Half the Story that the next generation does not want to put up with this, and that they are taking it into their own hands because they do not want to be the opportunity cost of someone else's profits.
Well, that is it, isn't it? There's so many, well, not so many, there's companies, but there's so few people behind all of this, all this digital technology and AI that all of us are now consumed by. That actually brings me perfectly into a clip that we want to play, because let's break this down into our own day-to-day experience. If you think about it, when was the last time you were lost and someone in the street went out of their way to help you? Or if you're not feeling well and you're out and about, did you approach someone to ask for help? Have we all come a bit distant in general? Listen to this.
Do you have pro-social habits? Can you help somebody cross the street find their way if they're lost, if they're in need, if they're blind, if they need help? You know what I'm saying? I have a whole IG story series where I talked to a stranger today, and this is what we talked about. I'm talking to the Uber driver, I'm talking to the lady in the grocery store, I'm talking to the lady at the library, I'm talking to the guy at the baseball field, I'm talking to the kid in the gym. I'm talking to everybody, because how is it that everybody wants to be a social commentator and a social freedom fighter and you lack social skills? You're an antisocial person. You promote antisocial habits and tendencies in your rhetoric. You're a liberator and you don't believe in saying hello to people? Super weird. I saw somebody stitch a Nika say, how come when I go to the grocery store, no one will say hello to me? Somebody said, you're not a celebrity. I have to be a celebrity to get help at the grocery store?
I see you both laughing at that. Tracey, I'll throw that to you. Is this, Larissa did point that out, is this a generational thing, and how would you describe it?
Yes, I would say it's totally a generational thing, in the sense that, and she made a very good point, that the younger generations, Gen Z and even below, and maybe some younger millennials, have grown up online. And the thing about being online is it gives us, I mean, yes, we've been able to connect with people that we may not have been able to connect with before we had, the phones, but it gives the illusion that we are being social because we're talking to people via chats or via comments. And that doesn't even come close to what it really takes to be able to be in the presence of someone, sense how they're responding to you, notice that they're listening to you and taking in what you're saying. You just can't get that from a comment or back and forth comments. And the younger generations are just used to that and become consumed with that.
Larissa, this is a very personal issue for you, isn't it? I understand from reading a little bit about you that when you were in college, you became very depressed, facing huge challenges. What led you to that point?
Well, we're on here with the professionals, so I'm sure she could speak to the many different factors: environmental, biological, hereditary. But ultimately for me, which I think is the greatest thing that we miss out on, is that technology, there's a huge debate around the causal or correlated relationship between mental health and technology for young people. I'm of the camp that technology is really a magnifying glass for your emotions. And what I mean by that is that I was already dealing with baseline levels of anxiety and depression. And so technology was really a way for me to run away from those emotions, and a way to hide, and a way to numb out. And as a result, at that point in time, when I was dealing with darkness and body image and all of these different issues, that of course was all I was being served on these devices. So it was me, my screen, and my darkness. And when you start looking at that for a certain amount of time, you start isolating yourself. And so the opportunity cost of the 8 to 12 hours a day I was on my screen was that I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't socializing, I wasn't going to school. And those are all the things that you need to be human. So naturally, you deteriorate when you pull away from them.
I want to just follow up before I do go to the professional. What advice, because I find that this is such a common place that young girls and young boys are finding themselves in today. What advice would you give someone who is struggling with all those things you described: body image, bullying, not feeling adequate enough? How did you get out of it?
Well, I was really lucky because someone walked me to my campus psych center, which was a true blessing and a privilege. But I think what's most important is that you really have to check in with yourself and your emotions. The speed in which the world is moving today and technology is moving is one that's faster than our ability to emote and check in with ourselves. And it really requires different emotional regulation skills outside of technology, which is a lot of what we aim to teach at Half the Story, because the next generation is growing up with a new set of tools or weapons, depending on what way you use it, but they don't have the human emotional regulation skills to actually flourish in light of these new devices.
Tracey, what advice would you give to parents, for example, who are dealing with their children who, perhaps feel it hard to communicate with their parents, telling them you don't understand? Like, how do you move forward from that and show them the light? Larissa was talking about darkness, getting out of that screen. What is your advice?
As far as like what a parent could do, rather than just simply saying, well, you just need to get off your phone, because then it sounds like it's punishment and that they're doing something wrong. Instead, I would frame it as, let's do something else instead, offer another productive or more physically engaging thing for them to do or be involved in, to limit the screen time without it feeling like they're being punished for something.
That also leads me to the idea of community, right? Many Eastern cultures emphasize community, while people often say that the West highlights the importance of the individual. Now, however, loneliness and feelings of despair aren't a regional issue, according to many reports. One of those, 2021 World Health Organization, says 6 African countries are in the global top 10 when it comes to the highest suicide rate list. That's incredible. And more than 1 billion people are living with mental health disorders around the world. Larissa, you've traveled a lot. I picked this out of your pre-interview. You were noting how you saw that different countries place different values on things when it comes to community, when it comes the sense of belonging to something. How would you describe it?
Well, when I first started Half the Story, what I did was got on Zoom and I started interviewing young people from all over the world, from Bolivia to Africa to France, all different places that had varying levels of mental health care. And at that time, 10 years ago, not a lot. I think when you share a stat that 6 out of 6 countries in Africa have rising rates of anxiety, depression, and otherwise, it's a bit astounding to me, because when I started my journey and what I learned from so many of those young people in places like Africa or in Europe that tend to have another value than just capitalism and drive in America, that community was really front and center. And while I think we're starting to see that technology does not discriminate against any culture, and that ultimately the next generation across the board and around the world is going to be dealing with the same things, which is why I like to hang my hat on the idea that we can empower digital wellness through a digital wellness revolution, because we cannot continue to live in the business of sickness and letting now what was social media 1.0, now the AI revolution, profit off of young minds yet again.
Tracey, we did a show on Blue Zones a while back, and they were talking about how loneliness can actually kill, that a sense of community is so important for us. How would you phrase that?
I would say that, loneliness can actually kill. It can, from the perspective of it leading toward these feelings of hopelessness, feeling like there's no way out. And that's a distorted viewpoint that you can get when you get depressed, that can be perpetuated by kind of others, kind of like a social contagion type of concept of if you get kind of buried in a bunch of messages that can lead you down the path of there's really no way out. So why even be here? I think, again, this is where it becomes super important for people to feel safe, to be able to reach out to someone. You don't even have to have a whole bunch of friends, because some people can feel like, well, I don't have a bunch of friends, so, this doesn't apply to me. I have no options. But all it takes is one connection with someone who you feel like hears you without judgment. And, so we build communities kind of one link at a time. These 2 people connecting, these 2 people connecting, these 2 people connecting, rather than feeling as though you've got to be able to, connect with all of these people in your community, because community can sound intimidating to a person who isolates and feels like they can't really reach out.
It's quality, not quantity, isn't it? Well, a sense of community is so important, as we were discussing there, to our mental health. And sociologists have been recommending having what they call a third place in order to have a healthy life.
Third place theory is the theory that home is your first place, work is your second place that is built on community is your third place. And it's the idea that you walk into this third place and you see familiar faces and it feels community driven. It's a place where you reoccurringly and you have people that you walk in, you interact with on the regular, and people that know you and you know them.
Now, Larissa, what do you see in those that pass through your organization? What are they struggling with? Like, how would you describe it?
Well, we really are built on the idea of empowerment and engaging with young people so that they can develop the skills to thrive. And as many of you that are watching this right now know that recently there's been a revolution to take phones out of schools. And school has been a third place for so many young people. But what we have been powering at Half the Story is teaching young people how to actually create third spaces and giving them grants to do so that we can redesign what the lunchroom or what a screen-free prom, which we have in America, looks like without devices. And the concept of third space is oftentimes not brought up within the context of the mental health and technology crisis, but it is so critical. And you had one of these phrases up at the beginning, because in America, the third spaces have become so expensive. If you go to Europe, you can have a tea for €2. If you go to America, you have to be spending between $7 and $10 for a Starbucks Frappuccino. And so we are trying to figure out how to make more play and fun in the third spaces that kids can be and give them the skills to actually rewrite the rules and design it themselves to go from screen fear or the deficit to strengths-based and screen-free fun.
Do you feel, just briefly, do you feel that the younger generation has a hard time dealing directly with people, having a phone conversation, for example, the things that us older people take for granted, not you, but me, for example?
Absolutely. We have a summer civics academy that kids from all over the world participate in, and we upskill them to be digital civics leaders in their own communities. We go back to the basics and teach them skills like, how do you call someone? How do you take an interview? How do you send an email? The reality is, as technology is rewiring our minds, we have to retrain humanity on how to be human. And that's a lot of what our work is at Half the Story.
Tracey, that's the perfect segue to you. The reality is that this digital world is here to stay, right? AI is accelerating at a pace faster than we can even keep up. How do we stay connected to each other? How do we remain human, as Larissa just said?
I think that program that they have is absolutely awesome. I mean, that's exactly what we need, a retraining of how to be human and how to talk to one another and listen to one another. Again, that's not, it looks completely different than going back and forth on chats. And if that's all you know is how to do it digitally, you're just going to be stunted, for life of being able to build more permanent and meaningful kind of connections in the future. So I think this kind of program is exactly what we need to be able to help people in the younger generation who are already used to not having connections to be able to be retrained and have their brain rewired to be able to actually connect with people.
Well, personal relationships are suffering, as we've been talking about. Let's take a look at dating. Globally, most of us end up marrying later in life, it seems, and in general, fewer people are marrying overall. Dating happens these days are also online. Swipe left or right. You have a menu of options at your fingertips, and if you're bored, next.
Now, the problem with online dating is it makes you focus on alternatives. They're constantly imagining the alternatives. Now, those couples are more at risk of breaking up. Online dating pushes that mentality far more. There's an addiction to novelty and an addiction to the beginning stages of a relationship and a repelling kind of response to the maintenance.
It's a muscle that you have to pay attention to nonverbal communication. And if you're just going through the emojis or going through the Tinder apps, that muscle completely atrophies. You have no power. You're not able to decipher anything.
Speechless conversation is very important. I'm talking about gestures, I'm talking about face expressions, I'm talking about seeing how the person interacts in the outside world. All of that matters, and all of that leads you to know a person really well.
Tracey, I'm going to throw that back to you. Nothing replaces face-to-face interactions, doesn't it? If you're reading a person, their body language, their personality, you may be connecting amazingly on a chat, but you stand in front of them face-to-face and suddenly you're like, you can't replace that, can you?
You absolutely can't replace that. The facial expressions, the whole sense of the vibe between the two of you. you're just not going to be able to pick up on that or extract any real information about that from a digital or online chat. So part of the retraining of the muscle, the social muscle, the interaction muscle, needs to come through interactions with people. And it doesn't have to be, it can feel overwhelming if you're not used to that and being told you need to interact more. It just baby steps. We need to take it in baby steps. And one way to do this is through low stakes interactions. So even as little as going to the coffee shop and interacting with the barista who's making your coffee, saying hello and making eye contact. You can lose the ability to make eye contact, which feels weird in regular social interactions. But if you're not used to doing it, then you don't know how to do it. So taking these little steps to interact with just ordinary people in your sphere is one of the ways to kind of get toward being able to have more meaningful interactions with someone who matters more, for like someone you want to have a relationship with.
It's interesting. I've definitely noticed that the eye contact thing, especially the younger generations, like saying hello to someone, shaking their hand and looking them in the eye. Loneliness is not gender specific, as we've been talking about. One of the hot topics on social media is the male loneliness epidemic. Many people are discussing this on podcasts and on TikTok explainers. Now, while some men may go through a particularly challenging phase, let's take a look at what could also be the cause of this.
The greatest lie the ruling class ever told was that loneliness has a gender. But loneliness is just a feeling. What we're experiencing is a condition called alienation. Alienation occurs when the world you used to dream of no longer exists. Cut off from community, taken for granted by our employers, and cast aside by the political class, we've become extras in someone else's film. Male loneliness epidemic happens when men can't bring themselves to let go of a future that never materialised. A future neoliberalism foreclosed before moving the goalpost and sticking a feminist with blue hair on the chopping block. So women are not the issue, and neither are men. We're all just mourning a future that disappeared. Instead of letting go of blame, we dance in the shackles that keep us enslaved. Loneliness is a collective grieving in a world where community doesn't exist.
Larissa, loneliness is a collective grieving in a world where community doesn't exist, he says there. Do you think that's fair, and can we reverse it?
I think when you look at nostalgic movies from the 90s, we have this longing for what community and connection used to be. And so I believe in this moment in human history, we have to reimagine and rediscover what it means to be one with another person, what it means to sit with them and be at the bottom of the ocean, and what it means to put community care sometimes over self-care in a world that has become hyper-focused on your own well-being or success.
Tracey, this digital, it's not even a digital future, right? It's our digital present. It's here to stay. It is firmly here to stay. How do we maintain, we've been discussing this, but how do we maintain our social connections, our mental health? You, of course, are specialized in this when we feel like it's all just becoming too much.
We have to put guardrails up on how much time we spend virtual versus in person. And there needs to, but it starts with a recognition that that's even a need, because it can't just come from people saying, you need to get out more. Like, the person themselves has to recognize that something is missing. And often people will recognize that something is missing. They just don't know why it's missing. They don't know why they feel empty or feel unfulfilled. So it starts with that recognition first. And then taking, I mean, this is very basic, but just taking digital breaks, go a whole evening, so we need to learn to be okay of having stillness and being able to appreciate being in the moment, practicing observing your current environment in a mindful state of being aware of where you are, instead of having your mind on, the next, someone answering your text message. And I think practicing that is a muscle, not to overuse that analogy, is a muscle that just takes time, but you can do it in little steps, little incremental steps.
And talking face to face, of course, so important. That's all we have time for. Such an important discussion. Tracey and Larissa, thank you very much for joining us on the stream today. And thank you for tuning in. Get in touch if you have a topic that's important to you and would like to have us discuss, because this is also your show and we want to hear from you. Get in touch on our socials and we'll look into it. For me and the entire stream team, we'll see you next time.